This shelf has all of the books that I own that I have already read, and it's getting a bit too full. We're gonna have to be a little bit cutthroat, and today I'm gonna decide which books that I'm gonna donate. So let's get cracking. So I already know that this top shelf is staying with me. It's mostly classics that I've actually enjoyed. I know, rare. And then some Catherine Arden and some Leigh Bardugo. And then on this shelf, I can already see one or two that I'm a bit like, okay, it's time for them to go. First things first, we can't get rid of these because these are books I've had since I was a kid that were chewed by my childhood dog. But I read these books, if I can get them out. These books, which are the Shadowhunter books by Cassandra Clare. I read these last year and the year before, I think, and I never read these as a teenager, so I never really had any great love for them. I read them as an adult and they are quite dated. They follow Clary Frey, who lives in New York, and it's a bit of a young adult urban fantasy, and she ends up embroiled with this group called the Shadowhunters, who essentially kill demons and bad guys. And we have some really great villains in this and some really great characters and relationships, but I've no great love for it. I thought it was grand, I had fun with it, but I think it's time for somebody else to get their hands on these, and I think somebody would be quite happy to get all 6 of them in one set. So this is definitely going to go. And then there is another book here that I'm a bit, it's a grief horror book, and it was a book that I expected to absolutely adore. And while I thought it was okay, I didn't love it. And I'm talking about Monstrillo. It's by Gerardo Samano Cordova, and we follow a family and their son passes away really sadly at, I think, 11 years old. And obviously his parents are incredibly overcome with grief. His mother, really traumatized by grief, decides to cut out a piece of his lung after he has died. And his mother hears of this old folktale that says that if you maintain a part of your child, you can regrow it into a new version of your child. Obviously, what grows is not actually her child, but she ends up loving him and caring for him, even though he is not necessarily safe to have around. It's quite a literary horror. It's written really lovely, and it really feels like a book that I should absolutely adore, but I just don't. Okay, Dune. I read the first Dune book 2 or 3 years ago. It was the year that the first installment of the recent remake was released in cinemas. I did intend on continuing with Dune Messiah, but the longer I go, the more that I just don't feel all that bothered. So we follow Paul Atreides. This is a sci-fi novel, and he ends up moving to a world where there is basically no water. There are a lot of different political facets at play here. The world building is absolutely incredible. I'm not going to go on about it because I think most of us know what this is about. It's a book that made me feel particularly thirsty, and while it was really good, I just don't feel absolutely enthralled with the idea of continuing with it. I'm already in the middle of so many series, so I'm going to pass it off. Robin Hobb, obviously that's never going anywhere. That's staying with me till I die. Moom and Papa at Sea. I actually read this one last month, and while I really liked it, I don't feel any great love for it, and I don't feel the need to have it on my shelves given that I'm getting so tight for space. So I'm going to donate this, and hopefully some little kitty somewhere is really delighted with it. It's such a beautiful book. It's got lovely illustrations in it, and it's not necessarily the typical feel-good kid story that we're kind of used to nowadays. It's dark and it's got depth and it's got moments, so somebody's going to really love it. The next one on this shelf then, I read and loved this book just before Christmas, Illuminae by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. This is a little bit difficult to explain, but it is a story and it's made out of files. So things like chat logs and reports and other documents and files. And it's a young adult sci-fi epic, and we follow 2 teenagers as they basically have to evacuate their planet because it comes under bombing, and they get embroiled in this conspiracy, and there's a lot to do with AI in this. This was really good. It was really well written, so much better than I had anticipated. I read a book by Jay Kristoff a few years ago, was it Nevernight, and I just didn't love it and actually finished it barely by the skin of my teeth, but this was really good. Although I did really enjoy it, I don't feel any great pull to read the next installments in the series. I feel like it was generally quite well rounded up. That said, I really recommend reading it. Sarah J Maas's A Court of Thorns and Roses. I am 100% going to get rid of this series when I finished reading it, but I still have A Court of Silver Flames to read. And when I finish reading that, I'm going to donate the whole series just all together rather than in two separate, so that I know that I will have that space. As much as it saddens me to say it, My Neighbor Totoro by Hayao Miyazaki and Tsukigo Kubo. So this one is actually based on the film. I believe it was written after the film, and we all know the love for Ghibli movies and the love for Totoro, but I didn't really feel that, so I'm gonna let it go because I know that somebody will be so delighted with this. Again, this is a lovely little hardback kids edition and it's got really nice illustrations in it. And we're down another level, so we are on the second last shelf. This is actually going quite well. This book, The Way of All Flesh. So I read this, I think in December of last year. It is a bit of a crime, kind of quirky mystery novel set in Edinburgh many moons ago, and I really enjoyed it. I ended up listening to it on audio though, so I didn't actually read the physical copy. And there are more books in this series and I probably will read them, but they're all available for free to listen to on my library app, so I don't feel any great need to continue to buy these books. Another one then I can see here straight away is Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice. I read this I think in October of last year and really did enjoy it and was really surprised by how dark and gothic and just wholly enjoyable I really found it. The writing is incredibly luscious. It is really dark. There are some kind of questionable themes in here. There are certain qualms I had when I read this book, but that said, I really enjoyed it and understood why it is something that so many people love so much. But again, I don't feel a great need to continue with this series, and I'm never going to reread this book, so I'm going to pass it on. And then I've kind of toyed with this one a bit because I kind of had fun with it, but it felt a bit like a mishmash of many other books that I have already read, and I don't know, I just think there are probably better books of this genre out there. I'm talking about Powerless, this one by Lauren Roberts. So this one to me felt very much like a bit of a rip-off of The Hunger Games and kind of many other young adult romantasy books. There were a lot of different themes and tropes that I just found in here that I have seen in other books done better. That said, I understand why a lot of people love this, but it is very YA and I don't necessarily recommend it, and I don't think I'm going to read any more of them, so I'm just going to pass it on. I know when I was of young adult age, I had very little money and I loved going into secondhand shops and being delighted when I found super popular books of the time, so we're passing it on. And then this next one, let me explain. So I ordered a first edition signed copy, a special edition of Intermezzo by Sally Rooney, and I received it and it was signed, but the copy that I got and the copy that everybody got was damaged. What Faber and Kenny's did to rectify the situation is they obviously sent out the original damaged books, but then they reprinted them and they sent out a reprint to all the people that had originally bought it. But the new one, while it's in perfect condition, it's not signed. It just says that it is a companion to Kenny's limited edition. And maybe one day this will be worth some money and I'll be sad for myself for having passed it on, but I don't need 2 copies of this book on my shelves. The other one that I originally read, it's signed, it's not that badly damaged, and it also has annotations and I've underlined it and it just feels like much more personal to me, whereas this one just feels like a copy I never really wanted in the first place. So I'm just going to slip it in among these books. I had thought of maybe sending it to somebody who really wanted it, but I'm just going to donate it, and good for whoever finds it in the secondhand shop. The next 2 then, again, we're noticing a theme here. They're books that I did quite enjoy but don't have any great love for, so let me scooch in here a bit. The first one is The 13th Tale by Diane Setterfield. This is a really sort of historical, gothic, mystery, engrossing novel. I read it last year or maybe now the year before. I really loved it. It was really good. It was everything that I wanted. It's got this really gothic house. It's got a bit of a mystery. It's quite dark. We don't know what's going on. We don't know who to trust. We don't know why things are the way they are. There is a famous author and she has decided to tell her story for the first time ever, and she requests a particular writer to come to her house and to help her write it. This young woman who is called to the house doesn't know why she has been requested because she's never written anything like this before. It's really interesting. It's very good, but I just don't feel the need to have it on my shelves anymore. And the next one is a book by Elif Shafak. It's the only Elif Shafak that I've ever read and I really liked it. So this is a story that's set on two different timelines. So we're in 1974 in Cyprus. We meet a young Turkish Cypriot and we meet a young Greek Cypriot, and they fall in love, and obviously at the time their love was not allowed. And then we also are juxtaposed against current day with this couple who have moved to England. This is a really enthralling, engrossing story, and not all of the storytellers in this book are human, which is something that I really enjoy. I really did like it in this book as well. Again, I think a lot of people really love this book a lot more than me, and I felt like my brain said that this is a really brilliant book, but my heart kind of didn't feel what I think maybe I would have liked to feel from reading this book. So again, it's one I'm passing on, but by no means is this a bad book. It's a really lovely read. Okay, from the very bottom shelf, I have another two books. The first is another young adult fantasy, and that is The Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Su Lin Tan. So this is a really fantastical novel, and again, it's another one I ended up listening to on audio rather than reading physically. And we follow a girl who lives on the moon and has been really kept hidden from the rest of the universe. She's living there with her mother and nobody really knows of her existence, but something happens and she ends up threatened. So she ends up going back to the planet that her parents are from, tries to basically save her mother, and gets embroiled in some political shenanigans, we shall say. There's a bit of a romance, and again, it follows a lot of tropes that I definitely recognize, but I know that a lot of people really love this. I think it's based on Chinese mythology. The cover is absolutely beautiful, but I just don't really feel all that interested in continuing with the series. I think I gave it 3 stars originally, and even at that now, for me, maybe it feels a little bit generous. I'm going to break some hearts here, and some of you are going to unsubscribe from me because I know that this book is often lauded as one of the best fantasy standalones ever written. While I see it, I don't feel it. So I'm talking about a book that was self-published that has now been taken up by traditional publishers because so many people love it so much. I'm talking about The Sword of Kaigan by M.L. Wang. This is a really intricate, interesting world. It's full of political division. There's so much propaganda in here. There are so many elements of racism built in. It's really a great story about what goes on in a place that's cut off and believes that their government is providing them with accurate information. I found it quite enthralling, but also a little bit slow, which I wasn't expecting. There's also some really great magic systems in here, and it's a book that I don't think I've ever heard anybody say anything bad about, and I'm not going to say anything bad about it. I just didn't love it, and I don't feel the need to have it on my shelves yet again. So that's it, pals. We have somewhere in the teens in terms of numbers of books that I'm unhauling today, and I feel really okay about it. I feel happy about it to have made some space so that I can fit the books that I have read in March, which I will discuss in a video coming up next weekend. If there's any books on here you think I should hang on to, tell me in the comments below why. Otherwise, if you want to see more from me, don't forget to subscribe, and as ever, thank you so much for watching, and I'll chat to you next week in another video. Take care. Bye bye.